7 years ago, I had a problem in my painting practice, a really big problem. I didn't have time to practice my painting. My role as a college art professor meant that more and more administrative duties were added to my plate, which left me no time to get into the studio, and I felt like my whole painting routine had been destroyed. What solved that was creating a whole new routine around a daily painting practice. So in today's episode, we're going to talk about how you can take cues, what we talked about in the last episode, those reminders or prompts, to build and weave a new routine that sets you up for a successful painting practice. So I want you to remember that cues are prompts or reminders. They're little triggers that tell your mind to take action. Just like a stop sign reminds you to put your foot on the brake and not go through that intersection. So it's just a reminder that tells you to take a certain kind of action. And we can put those together in an order to create a routine. That's all a routine is a set of habits or cues that build on each other to create a pattern that's repeated over time. That's all a routine is. So cues lead to a routine, which lead to habits that stick. The quickest way to build a new habit is to stack it on top of a habit or a routine or cues that already exist. So don't try to start from absolute ground zero. Start from where you are at this point today. So that means taking things that you already do that you may not consciously be aware that you're doing and build those together to create a new routine. So the way to do that is to make a list of the cues and the reminders that you're already using. You may not be aware of them at first. I talked yesterday about the fact that I come in and I make a pot of decaf, and that a particular kind of decaf really works well as a trigger for me because I relate it back to a really positive experience in my past. So that's one thing I do, but I stack it with other things. I put on my apron, my magic denim apron that helps me to get in that mood to paint. I get out my tubes of paint and look at the colors that I want to use. And actually the process of mixing paint, mixing the colors that I'm going to use in the painting, become part of that stacking of cues that gets me into the routine. Putting on particular music can do it. So the thing I want you to think about doing today is to do a little reflection. So you'll need to get a piece of paper and a pen. Don't type this on the computer. Our brain processes information really differently when we write it out in longhand on paper rather than typing on a computer. So get a piece of paper out and make a list of the things that you already do when you go into the studio to paint, wherever your studio space might be. So think about the things that work, maybe even the things that don't work. Make a list of them. Things that don't work, strike through them and work on eliminating them and not continuing to repeat them because they're getting in your way. And then think about consciously ordering the ones that do work so that you create a routine that's going to work for you. So it might be the act of pulling your paints out and setting up your easel and getting your support, whether it's a canvas or a panel, out and putting it on the easel. It might be making a cup of tea. It might be putting on that favorite piece of music that really gets your boat floating. But you're not going to really become aware of what those are until you write them down. See if you can come up with a list of 3 or 4 things. Now that doesn't mean you have to do them all every time. I don't always make coffee, usually do, but I don't always make it. I don't always put on the same music, but I have a set of things that I don't have to think about because they're so routine that I come in and do that trigger my behavior in moving towards the routine of painting. So those 3 steps, having cues or prompts that are reminders to take action, having a routine, lead to habits, and they're like a cycle that go around and build on each other. So over time, that habit and that routine becomes stronger and stronger. And there's actually some physiological processes that change that begin to reinforce that good pattern. Those of you who've ever been runners are probably aware of what some of the things are in that pattern. When you go through a routine like that, your body actually releases dopamine so that you get this high from doing that repetitive activity that gives you pleasure or makes you feel good. So they call it runner's high. Same thing happens when you're painting. You get a little painting high, and that is a reward that your body gives you without you even really realizing it, and then it calls you back to do it again. When you do it often enough, if you don't paint, it hurts. It feels weird, odd, and it really, really causes some internal anxiety until you go release it by actually painting. So it can really cause some physiological changes in your body and in your brain and how it reacts to stimulus. So build that routine slowly. And what that then leads to ultimately, after you develop the habits that we've been talking about, that will put you in what they call a flow state. You may have already experienced that at some time or another. A flow state is when you are so into what you're doing that you're not aware of what's going on in the surroundings. You are not aware of time, the passage of time. You're not super aware of what's outside of your vision. Your vision actually changes to a certain degree from hard, narrow vision, looking forward, like the predator animals that we really are, to more of a wide, soft vision. So you're able to physically see in a little bit different way. Being in that flow state is something that has been explored by a lot of researchers, starting in exercise physiology. So athletes have been using cues and habits and patterns to get into flow state for a long time, because if you're in flow state, you respond without thinking. You don't overthink things. And so they've been able to achieve greater feats of athletic ability. We can use those exact same things in painting to achieve more. So think about using those as ways to get into flow state so that you can turn loose of lizard brain and monkey mind. Because what happens with the lizard brain and the monkey mind is that they turn into critical voices as you're painting that tell you, you don't know what you're doing, you can't do that, you're not good enough, you'll never paint it that quickly, why did you choose that color, it's the wrong color, why did you make that mark, it's the wrong mark. And the voice doesn't stop. To silence those two voices, you want to get into the flow state where they become quiet. You make much, much, much better paintings when you do that. And you'll find that you're not overthinking what you're doing because you're just intuitively responding. We've all probably been there at one time or another if you've ever danced. When you dance with a partner, you don't consciously think about, now I need to move my left foot or now I need to move my right foot. If you think about it, it's too late to take the action. You just intuitively get in the flow, literally, of responding to each other. And it's because we respond on a more subconscious level. Our bodies react to visual stimuli, to kinesthetic stimulus, much faster than they do to logical, rational stimulus. So you'll respond to visual stimuli long before your brain ever kicks in. And as we're painting, we're being consciously stimulated visually. So get in the flow state by building that routine that's based on repeated cues and reminders. So I want everybody to go get that piece of paper right now and make that list and think about how you can build on that to create that routine. I'm going to hop into the page in just a second and see if there are any questions. And if I can get to the page quickly, because not sure I'm going to be able to. Let's see. Go semi-fast. It's been very exciting seeing all the paintings going up into the Artwork Living Facebook group. If you have not joined the challenge yet, the 5-day challenge that we're working on in the group, it is not too late. The 5-day challenge, it centers around creating a 20-minute painting a day for 5 days as a way to begin to form the painting habit. It's a short enough time frame to begin to feel some of that flow and that dopamine release and to see some changes happening in your paintings without feeling quite as overwhelming as a longer challenge. If you go to marygilkerson.com, you'll see a yellow banner up at the top. Click that banner for the challenge, and there is a registration button right there in the header. When you do that, you'll get the first day's prompt, and then they'll follow through the sequence. No matter when you start, you'll get the first day's prompt on the first day and then the second day's prompt on the second day, so that you don't get out of order and feel left behind. The challenge is going to run through the end of the month, so you can start any time along in there. You can post your paintings that you create within the Facebook group, and you can also upload an image. If you have a blog or a website, you can, and you post your painting on that, you can post the link to that painting on my website on the day's challenge page. So you'll get information on that once you join, but it's a way to pull some traffic back over to your page as well, because when people click on that link, it takes them to your website. So let's see where everybody is on here. Hey Lynn, it's good to see you. Let's see if I can get these in time, real time. Judd says, thank you for the challenge and all the support videos and info. You're welcome. And don't worry about it if you haven't started yet. There's no such thing as being late. You can start at any time, but if you want to post it on the page and be part of the bigger party of doing the daily painting challenge, hop in there sometime in these last couple of weeks of the month. And let's see. Deepa says, when I did painting number 2, I wasn't happy with my perspective. I was getting tempted to go in the evening and work on it. You can go back into those if you want to. I would strongly urge you, though, to leave them alone for those 5 days so that you can see the progress, and at least take a photograph of them so that you're documenting your process. Because if you don't photograph them, you're not going to be able to see the record of your achievements there, or your progress, or your changes in your painting. One of the things that's really important about forming that new habit is creating a tracking record of what you're doing. Posting online is one way to do that, but you want to track it for yourself too. So you want to take a photograph to document those as you go. So don't be too tempted to go back into them yet, but you know, it's okay if you just can't stand it and you feel like you've just got to get in there. I also want to remind everybody, we're on day 3 now. If you started with everybody else on the 18th. Again, okay, if you're not there yet. When we're on day 3, we're on hump day. We're halfway there. So take a deep breath and relax and realize 2 more days to go. And you can always come back in on them. But you want to keep an eye on not overworking them, keeping them fresh. And try to shave off a few minutes each day so that you move towards that 20-minute goal. If you don't get there, that's not a big deal, because the whole idea, number 1, is to get people painting on a regular basis, painting every day. The main reason to speed up is that when you have a container that's very short, that very short time period, it forces you to let go of lizard brain and monkey mind. So those voices have to turn off because you don't have time to go back and change and fix and tweak mistakes. You have to let them be. And that is what really gets in our way, is that monkey mind, which is very, very rational, goes, that line is not right. We need to fix that before we move on. When in reality, you're going to be much better off if you get the whole painting worked on at one time, and then you might find that line was really not that bad to begin with. So try to turn off those two things and work within a shortened container of time than you normally do, and that will help make a bigger transformation. If you notice that things weren't quite as strong on day 2 as day 1, that is not unusual at all. So people tend to go in one of two directions on day 2. They either kind of fall back into critical mode and they over-criticize their work as they're working through the process, and as a result the painting feels like at the time that it's not as strong. It's usually not a problem, but people perceive it to be not as strong as the first day. Or else you'll have that very linear progression of getting a little bit better every day. Try not to judge right now. Think about when you're writing a paper back in school. The best way to do that was to get a draft, a first draft. So kind of think about these paintings as the first draft. One of my favorite writers did an essay in Bird by Bird called The Shitty First Draft. And her point was that you just need to get words on paper, and you can go back and edit and judge after they're on paper. Same thing with painting. You need to get paint on a surface. You need to not overthink it first. You can always go back and revise and edit, but you've got to get the mark down first. And for so many people, that's where the roadblock is they just are too worried about failure to make that first mark. So give yourself permission to make some really bad paintings. Nobody is going to tell you you're making bad paintings. It is okay in the 20-minute challenge to make bad paintings. They're probably not bad. You just think they are because you're too close to it. So get that first draft down and think about what works in it rather than what doesn't work. I have a rule with criticism when I'm teaching, and I've had it for decades. And the rule is that you have to say 2 things, preferably 3, that work about a painting before you talk about what doesn't work. And there's a real reason for that. If you start off with the negative, with what doesn't work, you'll never get to what does. And you actually will build a better painting by looking and building upon what's already working than paying too much attention to what's not working. So go for 2 to 3 things that are working, and then you can talk about one thing that's not working or that could be improved upon. And always finish on a positive with something that's still working well. So it's a sandwich. We call it the critique sandwich. Positive, improvement, positive. That sets your brain up for success, and it quiets lizard brain and monkey mind. So let's see. Yes, and as Donna says, never forget the joy of painting. You cannot say that too often, Donna. Many, many times over. Yeah, Annie, I love Anne Lamott. I follow her on Facebook. And I'm also a writer, and I have found over and over again when I've been writing that having a first draft done will make the world of difference. Even if it's just total garbage, if I get something done and something out there, I can then go back and reshape it and reform it to make it work. But you got to get over that fear of the blank white canvas or panel, or the blank white page, or the blank computer screen. That blankness is something that's truly, really inhibiting. So if y'all haven't read Anne Lamott's Bird by Bird yet, highly recommend it. It's mainly for writers, but it applies for painters as well. And as Jan says, remember to have fun. Karen says, how long do you take to mix paints? I took an hour. I think when you first start out working this way, it's not unusual to take an hour or half an hour, 45 minutes to mix paint. I don't take as long as that because I've been doing it a long time, so I can mix paint within 10 or 15 minutes. But I already know which colors are going to go together to make what I'm shooting for. So it's okay to take an hour at this point to mix the paint first. One of the reasons to do that is that you can look at that palette and you can tell right away whether those colors are going to work or not, Whereas if you mix as you go, you can end up with some really unusual color combinations that don't necessarily jive together. Just a reminder though on that, I don't want y'all to worry too much about color choices while you're working on the challenge. It's way more about simplifying down to the basic shapes and working within that short time frame and getting paint onto canvas. So don't be overly critical with yourself about the colors right now. Let's see, Henny says, is it okay to use only 4 colors? Absolutely. You can use just 2 colors if you want to. If you want to do the challenge in just black and white and shades of gray, have at it. I think there's a lot of value in doing that. If you limit the colors, then that means that you don't have as many choices that you have to make. Our brains only process, I think it was 200 choices a day. So if we overload our brain with too many choices, it kind of has a meltdown. We've all been there where you've had a hard day and you've had to make lots and lots of tiny little decisions. And there's a point in that process where you just kind of throw everything up and go, I'm done. I can't handle anymore. So if you can take some of those choices away so that you only have a very small number of choices that you have to make while you're in the process of painting, it's going to go a lot faster and you'll have a lot easier time getting into flow. So I think that's a great idea. Monica says, I enjoy so much how you teach. Thank you. Can't wait for the workshop in Raleigh. I can't either, Monica. Monica's talking about a workshop, the language of color and light, that I'm going to be doing in Raleigh in May. So if you are in North Carolina, Virginia, or anywhere in that general vicinity, would love to see you there. Monica's got a great lineup of workshops for the year. Sally says, what workshop? Sally, I do live workshops as well as online courses. So I have a signature online course that I teach composition, color, and light, and a follow-up course / membership that I do called Catch the Light, and a business course that I do called The Painter's Business. So those are my 3 online courses, but I also teach live workshops. Love doing those. So there's a big difference between being online and being live. So the live ones that I have for this upcoming year are in February, May, October, and November. The February one here in Columbia is just about full. So I would strongly recommend taking a look at the one in May in Raleigh. And then I have one on Edisto Island in October and one here in Columbia in November. So those are really limited. I only let a few number of people in there because I like to be able to work more one-on-one. You can see those on my website if you go to Learn From Me and click that button and click workshops, or it's marygilkerson.com/workshops. And the Raleigh workshop is listed on there. So you can click there to go to Monica's site and get more info. Robert says, what do you use to thin paint oils if you're not using solvent? I don't thin my paints. When I'm painting, unless I'm working on a really big canvas, when I'm painting, I'm using paint straight out of the tube. Because I'm working a la prima, I don't need to thin my paints. So whether I'm using a brush or a knife, I am painting straight with the paint out of the tube. No dilution at all. One of the problems, well, there's several problems with solvents. Number one, they're hazardous to your health. There's not a single one on the market, and I mean not a single one, that is really good for you. So the more you can eliminate them, the better you are off. That sentence didn't come out right. The better off you are. So years and years ago, I realized after working with a lot of solvents in the studio that I was getting a lot of colds and a lot of respiratory infections. I got rid of the solvents, and guess what went away? All of the colds and the respiratory infections. So they, dilute the amount of oxygen that's in the air. They're a fire hazard if you're not super careful how you're handling stuff. So you want to be careful with them for that reason. You need to have really good ventilation in order to use solvents. Second reason not to use solvents is they're really not good for your paint. Solvents break down the bond in oil paint between the pigment and the vehicle, which is the linseed oil or the safflower oil, depending on what brand you're using. So if you break that bond down, it means that the paint has a harder time sticking to the surface of the canvas. And I have seen people who used really a lot of solvent and painted that like it was a watercolor in the underlying layer. And when you go up to touch the painting, even after it's dry, and you rub your finger, you'll have pigment on your finger, just like you rubbed a pastel. And that's because the bond between the pigment molecules and the paint vehicle, the oil, is completely gone. So you really do create some harmful effects in the painting if you use too much solvent. And most people use way too much. Third reason is it's really terrible for your brushes. You should only clean your brushes with what you would use on your hair. Would you wash your hair with turpentine? No. So I wouldn't use it for your brushes either. To clean my brushes, I use walnut oil. Now, I've seen people talk about using baby oil. Bad idea. And the reason is walnut oil, if you use food grade or artist grade walnut oil, it's the same stuff that can be used as, not the food grade, but walnut oil is in a lot of paints. It can be used as the vehicle in oil paint. If a little bit of even the food grade walnut oil remains in your brush after you've cleaned it, it's not going to harm the paint layer. If you use baby oil to clean your brushes and you don't get it all out, you're putting baby oil into the layer of your painting. Not good at all. So use baby oil to clean your hands, but keep it off of your brushes and out of your painting. Really bad idea. If you really need a solvent, then use something called oil of spike lavender. And it's expensive, but it's a natural solvent that is not harmful to your health. It's made from lavender. It's been used for centuries. The petroleum solvents that most people use now are a relatively new invention from the 19th century. They were developed for industrial use to clean machines. They were not meant to be used initially in paint. So it's a really hazardous thing in my mind to begin to use them. I am hyper about that because I have two mentors, two painting professors who ended up passing away because of their use of hazardous materials in their studios. One painted in encaustics in an era when encaustics were really not totally understood. He was one of the pioneers in encaustics. And encaustics have solvent in the medium. And he did not have a suitably ventilated studio, and he breathed those fumes in for decades. Really bad. The other one would lick his brush as he painted, so he ingested a lot of pigments and ended up dying of cancer. You have to be careful in how you handle the materials. If you look back at the Renaissance artists, most of them in the Renaissance and the Baroque period lived to be ancient. And the reason they lived to be ancient was because they were handling their materials carefully in well-ventilated spaces, and they were not using petroleum solvents. So, end of preaching. I get on a real soapbox about that because I'm so concerned about how people handle those. You don't have to switch to water-based oils to make them safe. You just have to get rid of the solvents. Deepa says corn oil to clean brushes. My only problem with using corn oil to clean brushes, and you can use that or you can use vegetable oil, is you've got to be really careful to wash that out afterwards. It can have some of the long-term effects that baby oil has. So after you clean it out with the oil, then wash it with ivory soap so that you remove the remnants of whatever oil you've used to clean. Again, same thing you would use to clean your hair. Don't use Dawn dishwashing detergent because that strips the oils out of the brushes that keep them flexible and useful over time. So it's a little too harsh. Yes, Marina, I know you remember because I preached that hard at y'all. I can really get on a soapbox about that. As Donna says, Murphy oil is also good to clean brushes. In particular, it's good to clean brushes that have dried out, whether they're in acrylics or oils. They're fabulous for that. I think the Geneva brush dip is fine. The only problem with the Geneva brush dip is it's a little bit more expensive. So you don't have to have that. Food grade, organic walnut oil will do the exact same kind of thing. Murphy oil will too, for a fraction of the cost. Yes, Sue, I love Gamblin's solvent-free gel, and I was going to get to that. If I'm going to use a medium at all in my painting, I either use straight linseed oil, stand oil, which is linseed oil that's been thickened, or I will use Gamblin's solvent-free gel or solvent-free liquid. Their solvent-free medium has absolutely no solvent in it. Almost all the mediums you buy otherwise in the store will have some solvent in there. Gamblin's does not. It is so solvent-free that you can actually fly with it on an airplane without having any problems. So highly recommend it. It comes in a gel, and then it comes in a liquid. And it will also speed up the drying time just a hair. So it's a little bit like Liquid, but not exactly. Liquid still has some solvent in it. Robin says, I use simple green to get rid of paint on my palette and an initial cleaning for brushes before gentle liquid soap. Yeah, I think that's probably fine to use. I think the Murphy oil might be a cheaper solution than the simple green for cleaning the brushes, though, so check that out. I use something similar to clean off the palette after I've scraped it. I use Citrusolve, which is a citrus cleaner that you buy at the health food store, some grocery stores carry it too. And it cleans off the palette without having harmful solvents there. Yes. For cleaning acrylic brushes, the Ivory soap and water. So a bar of Ivory soap from the dollar store will be your best friend, or even shampoo, for cleaning the acrylic brushes. Remember, when you're using a pigment that's a strong primary color, like the 2 reds or the blues or any of the yellows, those have a lot of staining power, so you're not necessarily going to get all of the color out of the brush. What you want to do is suds it, rinse, and repeat until there's no color in the suds. If you don't have any more color in the suds, even if there's a little bit of color still in the brush is clean. It's just that the fibers of the brush, particularly synthetic brushes, they're bad about being dyed. They've become dyed by the color a little bit. So they'll come clean pretty easily. Yeah, M. Grimm's walnut oil alkyd medium is good. It's still got a little bit of solvent in there, but it's so minimal that it's not a real problem for most people either. Yes, walnut oil is much more non-toxic. M. Grimm is another company that's really, really concerned about being health conscious as you paint, and they've got a great website on solvent-free painting. I used their paint when I was teaching undergraduate painting because it was an affordable paint for college students. It had a fairly high pigment load, and it had a system for working with it that didn't include solvents. So yeah, it's great. Jane, I'm sure Brush Flush is fine as well. Something that's produced as an artist brush cleaner is going to be fine, but what you want to watch for is just the price on that. Most of those actually are relabeled Murphy oil. So what a lot of manufacturers do is they take Murphy oil or something really similar to Murphy oil, and they put a fancy name on it for brush cleaning and sell it to you, and you're paying for that label. So that's the only thing to watch for there. Yes, for hog hair bristles, brushes too. That is exactly what I use, and they're more likely to lose their shape from solvent than they are from water. Rosemary's brushes in particular, I was reading a comment on another Facebook group about that. They are fabulous brushes, but somebody was complaining about them losing their shape on their soft brushes, and the problem was they were cleaning a really soft brush in solvent, and that destroyed the fibers of the brush. Solvent is antithetical to brushes. It's not good for the brush. It won't last as long. When you clean it with soap, if you want to reshape it, all you need to do is pull it with your fingers while there's a lot of soap in there and let it set up overnight, and it'll put it back into its shape. Cleaning it poorly and cleaning it with solvent is what makes a brush lose its shape. Not cleaning it itself, but cleaning it with solvent. Susan says, I have not painted in too long. Thank you for all this helpful info. You are more than welcome. I am excited to share that. Jan, the company is M. Graham and Company. It's a good student grade to good grade paint in oils. They also, I think, are now producing an acrylic line as well. The ones I recommend for oils really are Gamblin and Williamsburg, Vasari, Michael Harding, Charvan, all of those that are at the top. I'm leaving some off, I'm sure, because there are a lot of them that are really good. The reason you want to go with a really super grade paint, whether it's oil or acrylic or pastel or watercolor, is that the really good, really great brands don't have a lot of filler in there. So you're getting a lot of pigment and just the amount of the medium to bind it together. So you get more bang for your buck. For cleaning between colors, you can have a little bit of the oil, artist grade oil, walnut oil or linseed oil in a cup, and just dip the brush in, slush it around, wipe it off. Just like you would with the solvent, but that's not going to hurt the brush. So clean it with oil in between instead of solvent. Just remember, when you're cleaning as you paint, you want to be working with the artist grade oil, linseed oil or walnut oil, not with what you get from the hardware store. So make sure you're using the right ones. Yes, Pilon Lucas is one of those brands I knew I was forgetting. It's a very good grade as long as you get the very top one. It's a really high quality paint. Yes, I love Williamsburg, Veronica. It is my favorite. So, no Gamsol? No, I don't use Gamsol at all. I have a can that I've had for 5 or 6 years because I don't use it very much. I have it around in case of an emergency, but and I believe Gamblin when they say that the toxicity of Gamsol is much, much, much lower than all the others. But I don't want any solvent at all. It's still a solvent, and it still performs a lot of the same way. If you have to have a solvent besides the oil of spiked lavender, I myself would rather use turpentine for this reason. I'll throw the windows open, and I'll use it outside. Because with turpentine, I can tell how much is in the room. It's got an odor. The problem with the odorless thinners from Gamsol to the OMS you get in the hardware store is that you can't smell it, and so it builds up, and literally the fumes drop to the floor, and they begin to occupy the space of the oxygen in the room. And by the time you realize that you're a little giddy and lightheaded, there's too much of it in the room. Whereas with turpentine, when it starts really bothering you, you know to get out of the room. When you can smell it strongly, it's too much. You need good ventilation. So I don't use any of it. And I didn't ever allow it when I was teaching painting in college. I got rid of it 25 years ago. I had a young student who was pregnant, and she wanted to be in the painting class. So I did the research and found that you could easily paint without solvents. So we got rid of it. Imagine having a classroom with 20 students all painting with solvents. And then you'll see why I really quickly learned that much solvent is not good for your respiratory system. Neomeglip from Gamblin is basically, it's their formulation that's a lot like thick liquid. So it will work. It's got a tiny little bit of solvent in there. I would never ever use true Meglip because that has a lot of stuff in it that's not good for you, including lead. So Gamblin's version of that's fine. I just don't want anything that's got solvent in it. If you're using a medium like Liquin or Alkyd, the Walnut Alkyd, or the Gamblin Galkyd Light, any of those are fine. They've got a tiny, tiny little bit of solvent. I just have tried to get rid of as much of it as possible. Water-soluble oils, I use them for making monotypes, but they don't have as wide a range of colors. The texture to me doesn't feel the same as regular oil paint. So I don't use it for painting, I use it for monotypes. But I know a lot of people love it. It just doesn't have the same body when I'm painting with a palette knife, so that's why I don't use it. There's no real advantage to using it other than the cleanup is with water, but you can clean up with oil. So I don't see it as the pluses outweighing to me what the minuses are. But I think which one you choose to use is really very personal. I don't think you should get rid of them if you're already using those. If they work for you, stick with it. I just want a wider range of colors to choose from, and I want the body of the better grades of oil paint. What do you use for oiling in painting full spots? Oh, the spots on painting. For oiling in, I just use linseed oil. So that's a complex process I'm not going to go into right now, but it's relatively simple, but kind of complex process. It's just adding a layer of oil and letting it soak into the surface of the painting when you haven't worked on it in a while. Let's see. Yes, somebody mentions most likely bad for our pets too, and solvents. Another good reason not to use solvents, and I'm going to let the solvent thing go for a little bit. If you're working in a home studio and you're using solvents, even if you're using them in a separate room from everybody else, they go into your ventilation system. So everybody in the house is breathing solvents in. Your pets, you, your children, your family, everybody is breathing solvents. Not good for you. So keep that in mind. It's not a really good idea at all. So, I think I know I'm skipping some questions because Facebook scrolls in a way so I cannot see them all. Let me go to the bottom and see if I can get to them. Yes, Murphy oil works beautifully. Terpenoid natural, I don't use it very much because I don't think it's a really good medium to use, and the smell of it bothers me as well. So to me it doesn't work as a medium, but I have used it, what I have, to clean things up, so I think it works fine to clean things up. Yeah, Terry says she's painted with lavender oil over 40 years in her China painting and it smells so good. Yeah, I don't think I would use lavender oil as the medium, but oil of spike lavender makes a great solvent. So yeah, it works beautifully, and it's been used for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. So we know what it's going to do chemically to paint. Let's see if I have anything else that I'm skipping that we haven't already covered. Leslie's asking, are you planning to go live every morning at the same time or just during the 5-day challenge? Just during the 5-day challenge. I go live a lot, but during the 5-day challenge, I'm going live every morning at 11 Eastern Standard Time. So after that, I'll be going back to going live one day a week, and I haven't decided exactly which day that's going to be yet. I've experimented and played around with a bunch of different days, but it will probably be during the week, like Tuesday or a Thursday. Not really sure yet. I'm playing that by ear. But yes, I will be going live regularly even after the challenge is over. I think I have got most of the questions that people had. Again, if you have a question, you can always post it in the free group, and I'll be scrolling back through these to check to see if there are any big ones that I have skipped. Winsor Newton paint. Somebody was asking about that. I don't use Winsor Newton, and I don't ever use Winton. I don't think it's got a lot of pigment in there. Winsor Newton has some great colors. The reason that I don't use Winsor Newton is it's mass produced, and all of those brands that I recommended are produced in small amounts by small companies, and they're more handmade. Winsor Newton paint, every color has the same consistency. And so you lose some of the individuality of what happens with particular pigments. There's some wonderful ones. They've got a great Terra Verte that I recommend to people. And it's perfectly fine to use. It's just not one I prefer. Reiterate, people really do get a preference for what they have been used to using. So if you use something else and it's working for you, don't necessarily change it up because some other teacher tells you that what you're using is wrong. If it's working for you as far as the brand of paint goes, stick with it if you're able to achieve what you're trying to work with. Usually, scaling up what you're painting with and what you're painting on will make a huge difference in your painting. So just upgrade as much as you can afford to do, little bit by little bit. It'll make a big, big difference. Let's see. I think that's it. Eatable, the difference between, that's a great question, Judy. The difference between food grade walnut oil and artist grade walnut oil has to do with the filtering process. Food grade walnut oil has some other things in there that are not necessarily bad for us to eat. In fact, they're not bad for us to eat. It wouldn't be food grade. But there's some impurities in there that you don't want in your painting. So artist grade walnut oil has been filtered and refined a little bit more so that it's got better properties for painting. That's the big, big difference in it. When I use walnut oil to clean, I go to the health food section and get Spectrum walnut oil. That's the main brand here in the U.S. And you can find it in almost all health food stores. I get the big bottle, and one bottle will last me for a year. You don't go through it very fast at all. What for your old stiff brushes? The thing that will clean those is Murphy oil, whether it's acrylic or oil. Soaking them for 24 hours in about half Murphy oil and half water will loosen up that dried paint, and then you can clean the brush in water and more Murphy oil to get it out. Just rinse and repeat until it all goes out. So you can reclaim dried out brushes with Murphy oil. That will work beautifully. Let's see. I think that is about it. Oh, Vicki says, when am I coming to California? Probably sometime in the next 12 months or so, certainly by the spring of 2019. We're working on that. I've got a student who lives out in California above LA and near Ventura, and so we're trying to work something, slowly get towards working something out so that I can come out there. Yes, Christine, I am committing to it. But yeah, I'll be coming out to California at some point. So I think that is it. Sally, I'd love to have you at the workshop in Raleigh. That would be great. Jim says, I'm painting in acrylics and I'm considering introducing oil. For a home studio, how do you mitigate the chance of rags spontaneously combusting? Fabulous question. So what you do with rags that have gotten oil infused in them is you dump them every day outside in the trash in a covered receptacle. Do not let paper towels and cloths that have oil paint on them remain inside overnight. So you just dispose of them every day. So they make actual oil cans. I have one right over here in my studio that's a red can that has a lid that automatically goes down. You step on it to put the paper towels in there or the rags that are saturated with oil. But even that red can will tell you to empty it every night. But the lid has to be on there. If oxygen can get in, it can catch on fire. Walnut oil does not catch on fire as easily as linseed oil. So another reason to possibly use more walnut oil. But you're good as long as you take that trash out every day. But don't let it build up in the house. And you want to do that anyway. You don't want to leave paint rags around because dogs and small children have a habit of getting into them. So just empty the trash, and it's the easiest solution around. So get rid of it, and you'll be good to go. Is it a good idea to put some medium on the canvas before starting to paint? No, 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 no. I know that Bob Ross has done that, but it's not a sound practice. So when you're painting, you want to build up from thin to thick, both in the amount of paint you're using and in the amount of medium you're using. Lean to fat. So do not put medium on the canvas before you're starting to paint because you're introducing too much fat in that base layer. So don't do that. Start with very little medium in those underlying layers so it's fairly lean, and then keep either the same amount of medium in there or a little bit more as you build up if you're working in layers. But no, don't start into wet medium like that. That's not a really good idea. Yeah, Susie, alcohol will clean acrylics out of clothes. And so is Murphy Oil Feather is a cleaner. It's a cleaner for household. It's a safe, natural cleaner for households. So, yay, Marina. I'm in your head forever. Hey, Timo. It's good to see you here. And I think that, no, they will combust if you just leave them around. They can. About a year and a half ago, Blue Ridge Oil, which is a paint making company here in the southeast of the U.S. They're up near Asheville. And somebody forgot to put the lid down securely on the waste bin at the end of the day, and it caught on fire overnight, and they lost their whole facility. So it happens, and it can happen to the best of us, but you just have to take stuff out every night. I don't use a whole lot or leave a whole lot of stuff out. You want to put it away and just be safe. I would do that no matter what the medium is. A lot of people worry about that and switch to acrylics instead, not understanding that acrylics have some health hazards as well. Acrylics have formaldehyde in the medium, so that's why it has a little odd odor at times. It's because that formaldehyde and detergent are in there to keep mold and things from growing in there. That doesn't mean acrylics are bad. It means that they have off-gassing because they're a plastic, they're a petroleum product. They off-gas. That can bother people as well. So you just need to have good ventilation, good hygiene, toss your stuff out, get it outside, and don't eat your paint. And you'll pretty much be good to go. So that's all for today. If you have any other questions at all, drop them in the comments below. I'll try to scroll through later and check them out. Hop over to the Artwork Living group and post your painting for today. If you haven't joined yet, go to my website to do that. Would love to have you in the challenge. It's not too late to join at all. Happy painting, everybody. Bye-bye for now.